We are currently right about here, approaching the danger zone.
Are you ready to catch it?
Okay.
Good thing I'm not getting paid by the hour. Almost made it. It was a good idea anyway.
Making a plus.
How's it going?
Uh-oh.
It's just primer. We'll be fine.
You don't want to be in the video?
Whatever.
Whatever. Getting there. The paint, I think, is done. Looks pretty good. The camera makes it look a lot more blue than it really is. I'll see if I can fix that in post. Took a lot of paint, about 5 gallons of paint for this small 200 square foot space, which is incredible and expensive. The second floor exterior sheeting is also done. I'm trying out a new camera. Well, it's not new, but it's new to me. So we'll see how it does. Gets a little precarious with the ladder on this end. I started the interior sheeting and I put up some electrical. There's 2 outlets, a switch, and a switched outlet for the lights. I've got to put up 3 more interior panels, do some painting, and then put up the lights. And I got to patch this hole in the ceiling. And then this space will be ready to occupy, which is fantastic. I can put up shelves and start getting a lot of this junk off the shop floor. So I'm pretty excited about that. This should go pretty fast, hopefully, maybe. I don't have any salvage plywood that doesn't have holes in it. So we're gonna have to make a patch. Not my best work, but it'll do. Okay. Looks pretty good. Well, good enough for a second floor storage loft anyway. I'm gonna turn things over to the painting crew and move on to the electrical. So I'm tired of working in the dark. I am currently about as far away from the main electrical panel as it's possible to get. It's way over there. So I've got to run about 140 feet of conduit. Some of you were not happy that I skipped over the wiring in the last video. So we're going to rectify that by going through the wiring of the sub panel in excruciating detail. Now, fair warning, I am not a professional electrician. If you are a professional electrician, you probably want to just skip this part of the video. It's probably going to be pretty cringy. Also, this wiring is not subject to any kind of inspection. It's also only applicable to my specific area. If you live somewhere else or you have inspections, your mileage may vary. We are trying to connect a sub panel to the main panel, which seems simple, but it is surprisingly complex. So how do we know how to do it correctly? Well, you got to have this magic book, the National Electrical Code. They update it all the time, but usually the updates are pretty minor, so it's fine to have an older version. Mine is over 20 years old. It's still fine for what I do. Now, contrary to popular belief, this is not a government regulation. This is made by put out by the National Fire Prevention Association, which is a private entity. I believe it's actually sort of a conglomerate of insurance companies. Anyway, this book is not available, for free online anywhere that I know of. You have to buy it. And it's a worthwhile investment if you're going to do any kind of serious wiring. So here's the steps. First, we need to figure out what is the estimated load on our sub panel. There's a whole section, chapter 220, that helps you estimate the load based on square footage and lighting and appliances and whatnot. When I went through that, I get a load of about 17 amps, which is not much. So we're going to go ahead and generously round that up to 50 amps. So now we need to figure out what size of wire to run from the main panel to the sub panel. And that's where things get kind of complicated. So first we need to size the conductors based on ampacity. So we'll start with 310/16. The tables in this chapter give us the maximum amp carrying capacity for any kind of wire in any kind of configuration. And that is regardless of what the manufacturer says. So if they say their wire can carry more amps than this, that doesn't matter. This is the only number that matters. And I'm going to apologize right now. This whole book is a frustrating mix of metric and standard US units. I don't know why. That's how it is. I've gotten so used to it that I don't even think about it anymore. I switch back and forth between the two all day, every day. But reading this book is like working on a car from the 80s. And I could see how that could be kind of frustrating. Anyway, we're going to use THHN wire. That's the most common kind of wire that's pulled through conduit, at least in my experience. And we need to carry 50 amps. So you can see here that 8 American wire gauge is good for 55 amps at 90 degrees Celsius. But it's not that simple. There are a lot of factors that can derate this maximum amp rating. So the first one is temperature. So the wire is good for 90 degrees Celsius, but we have to consider the connections. The temperature rating is for the circuit as a whole, and typically the connections are only going to be rated for 75 degrees Celsius. On older stuff, it's more likely to be 60 degrees Celsius. So you got to check your panel and your breakers. 90 degrees Celsius terminals are still fairly rare in my experience. So if we're going to hook it up to a standard breaker or panel, we have to use the 75 degrees Celsius rating, which is 50 amps. But there are more factors. Ambient temperature. So if you're putting this in a hot environment like a foundry, that reduces your amp carrying capacity. Also, if you have more than 3 conductors in the same conduit, you have to reduce the amp carrying capacity. Then there's the voltage drop. They don't want the voltage to drop more than 3% from one end of the circuit to the other. And there are kind of complex formulas to figure that out. Generally, the rule of thumb is 1 foot for every volt. So if you have a 120 volt circuit, you can go up to 120 feet without worrying too much about voltage drop. We're at 240, so we can go 240 feet without worrying about the voltage drop. So we're going to disregard that. We should be able to use the 50 amp rating because our terminals are good for 75 degrees. Our ambient temperature is less than 30. Our run is less than 240 feet. And we have less than 3 current carrying conductors in our conduit. Say that 3 times fast. That was probably the hardest part. Next up, we have to size the overcurrent protection. The wire has to be protected from a short circuit by a fuse or a breaker. In our case, it's pretty simple. We'll just use a 50 amp breaker. But there are cases like electric motors or welders where you are allowed to use a larger breaker than the current carrying capacity of your wire, which is counterintuitive, but it has to do with inrush current and duty cycle, and there are tables that can help you size that. Let's move on to the ground conductor. That can be a little bit confusing. There's a table. This table gives us the ground size based on the fuse or breaker size. We have a 50 amp breaker, so we have to round up to 60. We're going to need a number 10 ground wire. So now we have to size the conduit. We're going to need 4 wires, 2 hot wires, a neutral wire, and a ground wire. So we're going to have 3 number 8s and 1 number 10. Conduit fill. We want C1 for electrical metallic tubing. That's the conduit that we're using. And we're using THHN, which is over here. Number 8, we can fit 3.5 inch conduit, 6 3/4 inch. So we could probably fit 3 number 8s and a number 10 in a 1/2 inch conduit. There's actually online calculators you can use to calculate the actual conduit fill when you have mixed sizes of wires, but that's not going to be very fun. We're making a pretty long run, so we want to have a little bit of room. We're going to 3/4 inch conduit. Looks like the painting crew has done their thing. Kind of left a mess, but it certainly brightens up the place. All right, let's run some conduit. This piece here I bent and installed when I did the framing. So we've got to make a little bit of a jog to come out and go through that hole through the wall. So we'll see if we can pull that off. I've got a conduit bender and some limited skills. What's the worst that could happen? There's all kinds of scientific guides to how to bend jogs in conduit. This is not that. I just go kind of by what feels right. So we'll bend a little bit. Somewhere like that. There we go. Pretty close. Looks pretty good. Took a few iterations of bending and unbending and rebending. It's more of an art than a science. Oh, will it go through? Yes. Okay, the rules say you got to have a support within 3 feet of the connection and at least every 10 feet. That looks good. Now we just continue our run horizontally until we get to the corner. All right, this piece needs a 90-degree bend, and we're gonna do what's called a back bend. So I know that there's 32.5 inches from the last piece of conduit to the wall. So if I take my bender and line up this little star shape with my mark at 32.5 inches, and then bend it, when I get done, I should have just what I want. The only tricky part here is I'm bending the long leg up, but it won't make any difference. The easiest way I know of to get a 90-degree bend is to use a magnetic level. This thing is invaluable for running conduit. There it is. Now, if we did everything right, and I'm not saying that we did, we should have 32.5 from the end of the conduit to the very back of the 90-degree bend, which is just what we want. We made it from there all the way over to about there. Now we got to go from there over this utility room, down through the ceiling, and into that wiring trough. This last bit gets kind of complicated. You can see I've already done it twice with these other 2 conduit runs. We have to do a double 90-degree bend. And the easiest way to do that, at least for me, is to work backwards. So I'm going to start at the trough and run back towards the conduit we've already run. So I've gone ahead and bent up this piece, kind of like that. And then we'll have to cut a piece to go from here to the part we've already run. So now I need to drill a hole in the top of that trough for the conduit to run through. To do that, I'm going to use a step drill, and I've got this handy extension so I can mark where I want it, reach all the way down through the ceiling, and drill right into the top of that box. This is a conduit reamer, and its whole purpose in life is to clean up the burr after you cut conduit. So if you're going to be pulling wires through here, you want it to be as smooth inside as possible. This one's made by Ideal Industries. This end is for threading on wire nuts. Keeps your fingers from getting tired. Thread this in like so. There we go. Nice tight fit up against the wall. Let's see if we can get that end in. May have to go down downstairs and tweak it a little bit. That's it for the conduit. I think it's pretty decent for an amateur. Yeah, let's move on. It's way hot up here. So if I was a real electrician, you know, I'd just spool this wire off of a 500 or 1,000 foot spool, but I'm not a real electrician, so I just go to the local getting spot and they sell it to me by the foot. We need 127 feet, about 140. So I already pulled a fish tape through. And I'll show you how I make this up. This is the way I was taught. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's always worked fine for me. So what I do is just strip it back yay far, split the strands in half, cut off half the strands, stick it through the fish tape, and then bend it back on itself, like so. And we'll do that with all four. Right here. Okay,
I
now
really like the color of this wall.
pencil sketch.
Pencil sketch.
Now we just wrap this whole big mess in electrical tape. The goal is to make a solid connection but not have a big bulky thing you're trying to pull through the conduit, because it's going to pull hard. We're maxed out on bends. I think you're only allowed to have 4 90s, and we have all 4 plus a couple jogs. Okay.
Other than OSHA supervisor.
Yep. All right, your job is going to be to spool the wire off of, just unspool the wire, and then I'll pull it from the other end. I do have some wax, we can try that if you want to try it. Might make it pull a little bit easier. Once again, you've done this before.
You always say that. Did I get the microphone from my catchy one-liners?
Yep. All right, I'll start pulling.
Okay.
I guess you're good at yelling, so if there's a problem, just yell.
Yes! Just hold up. Hold. Something's wrong with the green. I honestly think it would just be easier if all 3 were on the ground. I'm starting with green on the ground. Okay, try again. It came to me that way. Okay.
You just try to
spin them as we go?
Yep.
Okay. I am not an electrician. I've never studied anything with construction.
Neither am I.
Yeah, I had to stop at the end because I had to undo your tape.
Oh, all right, that's pretty good. You got a little bit left over. Cool. Success.
Success! That was drama. That was like divorce court drama.
I don't know what she's talking about. Let's go ahead and make up this panel real quick. Pretty straightforward. So we got 2 hots. One is red and one is black. I'll snip that right about there. I got this fancy tool for stripping this bigger wire. It's Pretty sweet. Huh? Pretty cool, huh? I love it. Click. Okay, now the neutral. Now this is the part where everybody screws up. Technically, the neutral and the ground are the same thing. There should be zero potential between the two. But the only place where the ground and the neutral are allowed to be connected together or bonded together is in the main panel. If we have a sub panel, we have to install this separate ground strip and keep the ground isolated from the neutral. Otherwise you can get what they call ground loops, which I don't entirely understand, but it has something to do with basically causing the ground to carry current when the ground should never carry current unless there's an emergency. And I think people get confused by that because they used to let you do that. So somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in the old days, you used to be able to bond the ground and the neutral together in a sub panel. In fact, I have actually seen CNC machines where you're required to have a ground rod pounded into the ground and bonded to the ground at the machine, or else you void the warranty. And I've also seen other CNC machines that say absolutely do not install a ground rod at the machine. That can cause ground loops and that will void the warranty. So who's right? I have no idea, but this is what the current code says to do. Well, I guess while we're here, we might as well go ahead and make up the rest of this panel. 20. I don't know, these Homeline panels are just kind of janky. There we go. The QOs are better. The QOBs are even better than that. Anyway, these are all 110 volt, and then I'll leave a 220 space here for an air conditioning unit or whatever in the future. Okay, that's the general idea. We're going to have lots of space in this panel, so there's no need to really go crazy. And if you want to jump on Instagram or whatever and see these immaculately constructed and laid out panels, you know, be my guest. As soon as the front cover's on this thing, nobody's ever going to see it. I think that looks pretty decent. But like I said, nobody's ever going to see it. We're not done. There we go. You are required to label your circuits. It's in the book. This end is a little more sketchy. There's a lot going on in that panel. There's our new breaker. That's going to feed us power. Yes, the panel is hot. Yes, it is dangerous to work inside of a live panel. And yes, I do it all the time. Just, you got to be careful. I went ahead and installed the switch. These lights just plug in, I guess. If we can get all the paint off of the connector. There we go. I got a surprising number of comments in the last video about the blown-in cellulose insulation and how am I going to keep it from pouring out of the holes for the lights. Luckily, I was able to pull together my last 2 functioning brain cells and install a little bit of wool insulation over each opening so that the stuff doesn't come pouring out. Okay, that looks good. Haha! That looks fantastic. Oh, it's so much brighter. I could actually almost work in here now. There's nothing exciting about installing an outlet, but I'll show you a few little tricks that might help you. We have to make a parallel connection in this box, so the neutral wires and the hot wires and the ground wires all need to be connected together, and they need to be connected to the outlet. So we're going to start with the ground wire, and I've got this special wire nut with a hole through it. So all I'm going to do is cut one of the ground wires back, like so. Then I slip this wire nut over that wire, stick the second wire up inside, twist up the wire nut, like so. Now I have a wire for my outlet, and the wires are connected together. Now the outlet. This is 12 gauge wire. It can carry 20 amps, but most 110 volt outlets are only rated for 15 amps. So you do not want to hook 20 amps to a 15 amp outlet. In this case, the 20 amp outlets do not have the push connect feature. It makes it a little bit more tedious to install. Alright, now we just shove the wires into the box. Another little trick is that I always use the deeper boxes. They're only a few cents more expensive than the standard boxes. They're a lot less aggravating. Let's say, hypothetically, that some jigsaw wielding framer didn't get a very good cut on this outlet opening. We can use one of these guys to make sure the outlet comes out flush. Like so. Then we buy the jumbo size outlet cover to hide our mistake. And nobody's the wiser. Check this out. Boom! Light. Lots of light. Probably a little bit too much light. Might actually take that fixture out. We probably don't need 4 in a 200 square foot space. Anyway, really brightens the place up. Yeah, this room is done and ready to be occupied as far as I'm concerned. We're gonna have to come up with some kind of a door or sliding door or something here for this spot, but I can start moving stuff in here. It's possible I went a little bit crazy with the outlets, but the electrical is done. That's a good place to stop. We're getting very, very close, but we're approaching the most dangerous part of the project. Let me explain. If we plot progress versus time, it should be pretty much linear. We are currently right about here, approaching the danger zone between works and done. And those two things are not the same. We have to be very careful not to get sidetracked at the works boundary and end up over here on the asymptote of despair, where time goes to infinity and we never quite finish our project. We still need a stair railing, a couple of doors, some windows, and then we need some kind of exterior paint or siding solution. I really don't know what to do there. Maybe you guys can leave me a comment what you think. We looked at some kind of fake shiplap type stuff. That would be fine, I think, but it's kind of expensive. I've looked at barn boards. Those are even more expensive. I've looked at salvaged metal siding, kind of rustic metal siding. That's an option. We could just paint it. The whole rest of the shop is just painted OSB, and I don't have any problem with that, really. So let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you back for part 2, and hopefully that will be the conclusion of this project.
Gonna do it.
We figured out what to do with all the wood scraps.
It works way better.
Way better.
Yeah, it actually does. I didn't do it.
There we go.